Now, the government has pledged to offer £5,000 to homeowners in England and Wales to help them replace their old gas boilers with low-carbon heat pumps. So the grants are part of the government's £3.9 billion plan to reduce carbon emissions from heating homes and other buildings.
Yes, well, currently the government plans to phase out gas boilers by 2035, and this is a plan the Prime Minister is set to confirm in the coming days as the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow approaches. Campaigners have, however, said that the cash is not enough, with the new style heating systems costing much more than the £5,000 on offer.
Well, let's talk to business commentator Justin Urquhart-Stewart and Andy Mayer as well, Chief Operating Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Fantastic to have you both on the show. Andy, let's start with you. Is this a good idea?
No, Patrick, it's a terrible idea. This is essentially a woke welfare scheme for the wealthy. What the government is doing is pump priming a pump market which doesn't need priming. If people want these things, they can pay for them already, and they are deeply expensive. So the way they're going to pay for it with this scheme is by putting up gas bills for everybody else, principally people in red wall areas who won't be able to afford the installation costs of these pumps, regardless of the scheme, because they are extremely expensive. And those taxes on your bills will then go to people who would do this anyway, because it's the sort of thing that they can do because they have lots of money. So on the off, this is not something that should be happening now. The government should be trying to decarbonise electricity before even thinking about this. And it needs to do that in a way that isn't going to interfere with the price mechanism.
But they have to do something, surely, don't they? Because at the end of the day, the reality is they do plan to phase gas boilers out by 2035. People on the poorer end of the spectrum will be wondering, well, how am I going to afford this? And this will come as welcome news to those people, surely.
Well, at £8,000 to £18,000 the installation cost of an air source heat pump, or £20,000 to £45,000 for a ground source heat pump, they're not going to be able to afford it anyway with this £5,000 bung. So they're not the people who are going to be doing it. It's the people who can afford to do it that will be doing it, would have done it already. And looking at some of the other issues this causes, if it was in any way successful, what would also be happening is you'd be taking people one by one off the gas grid, raising the cost of gas supply, at some point meaning that it would become unaffordable for those left behind. So the government would need to nationalise the gas grid and subsidise those bills.
Andy makes quite a convincing case there. Where are you on all of this? Justin.
Oh, sorry, is that for me?
It's for you, yes. What are your views, Justin?
My view is totally confused. I'm in the process now where I'm exactly having to go through this right now. And I've taken a wreck of a house and trying to put together and think, well, let's try and actually design some of this in. And actually, whether do I need a combination of actually just, is it going to be solar? Is it going to be thermal? Is it going to be air pump? All the variations. And actually what you find is there are very, very few people who actually understand it all, can put it all together, let alone actually give you an idea what the total cost is going to be, especially the cabling and all the elements that go with it, and then give you an idea as actually what the payback is actually going to be over what period of time. This is a game for people who've got a significant amount of money to try and play around with. Frankly, the most important thing that any of us can be doing, that any of our properties at all, is just insulating them, actually just making sure that they're warmer in the first place. And an awful lot of us can actually do that really quite straightforwardly. There's nothing particularly magical about it. But what you're seeing here is a little playing around with the jigsaw. And I think Andy Mayer's absolutely right, that it is a sort of minor bung. When you look at the overall cost of putting together the proper economic running of a house, this is just playing around with one or two Lego bricks rather than actually looking at the overall plan.
And Andy, can I just ask you this? As I understand it, this has been criticised because it will apparently cover a maximum of 90,000 pumps, but the UK government aims to install 600,000 heat pumps by 2028, which is only in about 6 years. Is all of this just, the government set itself targets that are too soon, too near in the future, this 2035, this 2050, and actually they should just scrap the targets and just do it at a sensible pace, essentially?
Almost, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, this 600,000 target with 30,000 a year for 7 years would leave them 390,000 shy of that target. So what is the point of the target? They can't predict whether this is the right technology to solve the low carbon heat challenge. They can't predict what will be coming down the line in 2 to 3 years, let alone 5 to 10 years. So what they'd be much better off doing is letting the market decide whether these technologies are right for certain types of homes. And to be clear, they're not right for most homes. And letting other alternatives emerge organically. so you don't create these artificial supply problems. I mean, just to be clear on some of the comments made earlier on cost saving, the principal issue this is going to cause is what happened with the Green Deal, which was a previous government intervention scheme. And there's going to be a huge problem with the supply of labour for installation. You're going to get very low quality, untrained people trying to do this on the fly, which is going to cause enormous problems because, as was said earlier, this is not something that can be done very simply. These are complex installations that require you to take very seriously the needs of the house.
Yes, Justin, just going to throw over to you now for the final word. You mentioned there about insulating our houses being relatively easy to do. Do you know roughly how much that costs? I've got to admit, I've got absolutely no idea.
Well, it depends on what house you're going to be dealing with. But, you know, at the expense of literally a relatively small sum, by which I'm talking about £1,000, you can actually get a significant controlling of it, just in terms of managing drafts and such like, and just making sure your place is more efficient. Unfortunately, over the years, we have built some pretty rubbish houses, and the quality of them has actually gone down. I'm actually looking at a Jacobean house, which was falling apart. I have to say the standard of the brickwork on that is considerably better than some of the stuff I've seen recently. Although I have to say, dealing with a rather rusty square nail is probably not quite as appealing as some of the more imaginative bits of engineering I've seen.